Hi, this is Joanna with Winds of Whimsy. Today I'm going to share how I made a clay wreath using the new IOD Shade and Song stamp and Blossom mold. It will be painted with my favorite products from Debi's DIY. I use a styrofoam wreath form as my base for this project. It was covered by wrapping a torn piece of muslin around it and securing the muslin with hot glue every once in a while. Step 1 is finished. Now comes the fun part. You can see that I have rolled out air dry clay into pieces that will fit around the form to create a cover on top. I am using the Shade and Song stamp from IOD to create impressions on the clay. This stamp pairs beautifully with the Blossom mold that I will also use in the next step. At first I tried using the stamps with the clay on the top of the wreath, but that felt a bit awkward. So I decided it was easier to work on the flat surface to get a nice impression into the clay. My goal was to get some good texture into this clay, and then we will layer florals on top of this. The pieces were glued on using Titebond Quick and Thick. I was being very careful not to press away the design as I glued the clay onto the wreath form. As you can see, I did not put clay all the way onto the back of the wreath. I decided no one would see that. Next, the Blossom mold help to create the lovely branches and blossom that cascade around the form. First, be sure to dust with cornstarch to prevent sticking. The clay is firmly pressed and worked into the mold. You want to be sure and roll that package back up so the clay is not exposed to the air as you're working, because it dries out fairly quickly. So here I'm working on pressing that clay down into the details of the mold. And just keep working with it to get it into all the areas where you need the clay. Then you begin to scrape off the excess. As you can see, I like to use a putty knife sometimes to get that back, scrape that excess scraped off the top. You can also use your fingers. This mold is intricate and delicate, so the clay does break sometimes when the casting is removed from the mold. I found it's quite easy to fix in the gluing process. As you can put those pieces back together as you're gluing onto your final foundation. Resin is another option to use in these molds, which would give you a solid casting, but I wanted these to be able to wrap around the wreath form. I wanted to have more control than I would have with a resin casting. And I just love the natural feel of working with the clay. So I made a number of these various pieces and glued them into place. The wreath dried overnight to become more solid before I began this painting process. I adore layers of color and texture. Worn, old, and vintage is my vibe. So the first layer of paint is weathered wood. This is made by Debi's DIY. I love this clay-based, highly pigmented paint. It is super versatile to create texture and blending of colors. Here I created a wash to get down in all the cracks and crevices. The paint was watered down pretty heavily, and I put a solid coat over everything. I then use a damp paper towel and baby wipe to wipe back some of that dark. I want to leave it in the cracks and crevices to give an old appearance and to create the layers as we keep adding more colors. So my next layer of paint is DIY again in crinoline, which is an ivory with an undertone of yellow. This covers up the dark layer, but I am sure to leave a little bit showing through because I want that antique look. I'm liking how this is turning out. Okay, now we're going to add some color, just a hint of color. My green is a mixture of a new DIY shade called Eden. It's a nice dark green. I lightened that up with a bit of petticoat pink to get this minty color. The blossoms for the flowers are going to be touched with petticoat pink. You can see I am not precise in this process and just lightly hit the spots where I want to highlight a touch of color. I don't show it here, but I did also put some color on the back of this wreath and also the base underneath these raised flowers. I added the same colors, but I kind of blended them together. So it's a very soft effect. The last step is to seal everything with DIY liquid patina. The DIY paint always must be sealed since it can be reactivated with water, which is why I love it so much. You can play with the colors and blend beautifully. So what do you think? I love how this turned out, and I can see this technique being used with other stamps. Different flowers, maybe leaves. The possibilities are endless. I hope this project inspires you to create something beautiful that makes you smile this week. for today is "Have no fear of perfection, you'll never reach it." Salvador Dali.